Welcome. This is the Delta Wordweavers on January 14th, 2024. So welcome to the Delta Wordweavers. Let's see if I can light up my sign there a little bit. So thank you for coming to Wordweavers, and we have some storytellers. This is January, and so some of us were inspired by January topics, and others have things to practice. We like to say the Delta Wordweavers, it's a comfortable place, informal telling, and you can be here to practice your story. You can be here to tell your formal story anyway, or germinate a story. We're here to listen and to work with you if that's what you would like. So thank you for coming to our session here in January. Our first teller is Linda Kennedy, and she saw our topics. One of them said, what's it about squirrels, International Squirrel Day or Honor Squirrels. She said, I have a story about that. So Linda is here to tell us about squirrels. Linda?
Thank you. First of all, I want to show you this squirrel that I just happened to have. I don't know, can you see it? It was carved by my cousin's husband, and she actually placed a real little acorn down inside of it. Yes, and it sits on the hearth at my house here. The dog tries to get the acorn, so I have to watch that. Anyway, there's a little squirrel there. This took place, this story, about 20 years ago. Tom and I lived in Nevada City, actually up the hill behind Nevada City at an elevation about 4,000. We were very excited when our good friends Melissa and Quincy bought the place next to ours, and we wanted to start them off with some nice housewarming gifts. Now, I knew Melissa liked flamingos, so I got those little party lights and put them along the railing of the back patio or the back deck at their new home. Tom wanted to introduce Quincy to the wildlife of our property there, so he got him a squirrel feeder. Now, a friend of ours down in Nevada City made these, and they really amount to nothing more than a plank of wood, and at one end, a big open mouth jar. And you fill that, you see, with peanuts. You can mount it on a fence post. You can put it on a branch up in a tree. And Quincy loved it. And he decided it would go on a branch on a tree that he could see from his desk in his new office in his home there in Nevada City, or up the hill there. He loved it. He put the peanuts in there. He watched the squirrels come. He'd be sitting in his office working, and he delighted to see the squirrels coming and eating the peanuts. But one day, my husband Tom noticed that the squirrel feeder was empty. He said, Quincy, you're out of peanuts. I'm going to town. Can I get you some? He said, no. He said, do you know how many peanuts those squirrels go through? We have put bag after bag after bagfuls out there, and they'd continue to eat those peanuts as fast as we put them out there. So we've stopped doing it. They're going to send us to the poorhouse otherwise. Tom said, well, okay, maybe they'll change their mind some other time. Well, my husband's a bit of a trickster. We were down at Kmart there in the garden department, and he saw the little squirrel statue, sort of like the one I just showed you, little plaster of Paris ones. And he took that, he bought that statue, and he took that statue and he put it up on the plank facing that empty jar of peanuts. Quincy was working in his office. He looked out, and as he tells us the story, he said, the squirrels are there. That chance them getting any peanuts. On another day, he looks out there. He said, well, that squirrel is still there. And on another day, he looked out there and he said, that squirrel is still there. They're not going to leave until I feed them. So he goes downtown. He buys a bag of peanuts, and he comes back and he goes out to his squirrel feeder to find out that that squirrel is nothing more than a statue. He takes the statue, he puts it on his front porch for forest decor, and he sits down at his computer, Tom's email address, send, ding, you got mail at our house. Tom reads it and it says, funny, very funny, Tom, but I'm still not buying the peanuts. Well, a few days pass, maybe a month or so, and I get a phone call. It's Melissa. She says, Linda, you're not going to believe what I just heard, what I just saw out my kitchen window. A squirrel came down the tree, It went out on the branch to where we have a bird feeder, which it found empty. So it jumped down onto the railing and it snatched up one of those little flamingo lights and it carried it back up the tree. Do you think it's going to eat it? I said, gee, I don't know. I don't think so. She says, I better go down and go around the bottom base of that tree and try to find it in case it has fallen. Well, I told Tom that story. That was a bad idea. Tom got to thinking, He went over there. He found the squirrel out there by the front door. He went around and he snatched one of those little flamingo lights himself. He brought them home. He went down to the basement, came up with the lid of one of those white banker boxes, turned it over so it looked like a little picture frame. And he stuck the squirrel down in the left-hand corner facing in. He put the little flamingo down in the right-hand corner facing in. Then he sat at his computer. Print, got the scissors, cut. He had downloaded a picture of a little assault weapon. He cut it out and he pasted it to the front of that squirrel facing the flamingo. Then he got some little black tape and he put it over the little poor flamingo's eyes so it looked like a little hostage. And then he sat down with the magazine and newspapers and he cut, snip, 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 paste, 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 a message on the back wall of that box. And it said, give me peanuts now or one dies every day. And he had a black arrow pointing down to that little hostage flamingo. He gets his camera. He takes a picture of it. He prints it and he goes over to their house and he puts it on their front door. He waits for them to come home. Ding, you've got mail. He reads it. Very funny, Tom, very funny. But don't you think it's a little psychotic? Maybe you're watching too much Dateline. Maybe you're watching too many Laws and Orders. You're a retired cop and I think it's all gone to your head. Basically, that's the end of that story. But it's not the end of that friendship. How I loved watching them out under the trees with their little burn pile, talking in their little folding chairs, Tom reaching into his plaid flannel shirt, getting out a handful of peanuts in a shell, handing them to Quincy. They would eat them, throw the shells in the fire. That was a long time ago. Tom since has passed. Quincy's in advanced stages of Parkinson's. But through all of that, the story remains. And that's why we tell these stories, because they are here forever. And that is the truth in a nutshell.
Wow. Very touching story, Linda.
That was fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. And a good honor to your husband.
I bet you Tom really
Well
liked April
told.
Fool's Day.
Boy, he was loony. I was really impressed that he did that.
Yeah. Sounds like a very fun person. Nice.
Brought levity to the relationship and the neighborhood. That's fun.
Yep.
Thank
Good
you,
guys,
Tom.
both of them.
That was a great squirrel story. My squirrel stories are upsetting because they're ruining, the hillside, digging in. They're ground squirrels. They're just doing too much damage. So I'm not going to tell a squirrel story because I don't have a positive one right now.
Hey, so Linda, did
Yeah.
did you just create that story based on you read the different possibilities, or is that a story you had before that could fit in?
No, I've had that story ever from the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
I think I've told it at Sierra. Let me see. I actually I actually told it at a slam at Sierra Storytelling Festival.
Oh, nice.
Tom Wade was on the competition, so we won't even go there. But
Oh, yeah.
but I got home and Tom said,
I must have missed that year.
Yeah, I know. I got home that night. Tom said, how did you go? How did it go with the squirrel story? And I said, I don't know, Tom. I think they slammed me up against the wall and left me for dead. I said, Tom Wade was on. So what do you do? No, I've had that story for just for years and years, obviously. Yeah.
Nice.
But I don't tell it very often. It wasn't until the squirrel topic came up on the January calendar that I said, ooh, fun. Okay.
Yeah, that's how I
Well,
find
I
these
hadn't heard it before, and I'm
subjects.
really glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
So a good approach to
I must have
just
missed
give
it
a,
that year.
yeah, a flurry of topics, and it sparks ideas in us because we're all experienced storytellers, and you just need that little idea to germinate a story. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you.
Our next story is with Ed, who's here to work with a story that he's already begun to form. So welcome, Ed. Tell us about your story.
Okay. So this is a new story that I've been working on, and I'm going to tell it on Saturday at our guild, and I'm trying to practice up a little bit for it. So here goes. I was in love with Michelle in 2002 and ready to propose. There were some unique challenges, though, that I hadn't really expected. Her mother was a Roma gypsy that performed in the circus throughout Europe. And she, during World War II, when they were in Germany, the whole gypsy clan got thrown into death camps by Hitler. She was in a death camp for 3 years, and then 4 other gypsies and herself escaped, and they made it through Europe and all the way into Florida, where they joined the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And they had traditions that dated back to 250 BC that forbid marrying outside of the gypsy clan. So that was a dilemma for Michelle. But her father wasn't a gypsy, so even though he was a circus performer, she felt I might be accepted into the clan. And the operative word was might. Well, we planned a trip to Florida, where her brother and mother were living. The Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus has their headquarters in Sarasota, Florida, which is kind of the northwest corner of Florida. So we got there, we rented a car, and we drove about 30 miles out into this dense forest and down this small road. And we got to this clearing, and there was this 6'4" giant of a man greeting us. When Michelle got out, he hugged her. Oh, sis, it's so good to see you, man. I just love you. I haven't seen you for a long time. And this must be the guy who wants to marry you. Let me take a look at him. He said, come on, let me see you. He gave me a once over, and he said, well, you know, you're a little chubby, but I like how you look at me directly in the eyes, because you never know when you might have to fight or flee. So you got to be ready. And I like that about you. I appreciate that. And he gave me a big bear hug. And then he handed me a bucket, a stinky bucket. And he said, follow me. He had also wrapped this leather band around my arm. Well, he headed out. I just followed him in the forest down this small trail. And we were close to this clearing, and I heard growling. It sounded like mountain lions or some kind of lion. And we came to this clearing, and there were 4 huge metal cages, and each one had a Bengal tiger in it. We walked up to the cage. He says, hey, Barry, how you doing? And he opens the cage. First, he took the bucket, took the lid off, and grabbed up some smelly old meat and walked into the cage and sat down. And Barry came onto his lap, and he fed Barry and petted it like it was a little cat. And I am outside, frozen outside the cage. I pulled the gate a little bit shut just to make sure. And Barry kept eyeing, he kept looking up. And then, Michelle's brother's name is Harry. He went to the second cage, and the third cage did the same thing. And the fourth cage, he said, "It's your turn. That's why I gave you this strap." My turn? Usually I'm not at a loss for words, but I was a loss for words at that time. And he said, "Don't worry about it. This is Michelle. She's loving, adorable. In fact, I named her after the woman you want to marry. No problem. Go ahead." Well, I opened the gate, felt the pressure, and I reached in a little bit. And Michelle's kind of looking up at me, and I just tossed her the meat and slammed the gate shut. She just went over and tore up the meat and looked at me once in a while. And Harry said, "You know what? You're okay for a California guy." And he gave me this big hairy bear hug. And he said, "You passed the first test." The next test was to go visit the gypsy clan of about 40 people. You see, Ringling Brothers has bought up all kinds of land outside of Sarasota. And when you're retired or you need a place to live, they give you acreage and you build your own house and you get this property for free. And that's where Harry had lived. So I went to this. There were 40 people in this about 20 acres that were spread out in all kinds of different houses and tents and different things like that. And I met this whole gypsy clan, people from 90 all the way down to 4. And Michelle had also wanted to overcome any stereotypes I might have about gypsies being con artists or thieves. And these people were just fascinating. They were all circus performers, but the younger crowd, they had seen the light on the wall that there weren't going to be animals around much longer in the circus. So they were daredevils. They were trapeze artists, some clowns, but the 16, 17-year-olds rode motorcycles, and they rode those big rings that go around like this. They were just fascinating people. And about 12 of these 16 to 20-year-olds were heading off to Romania to go into a circus over there. They were just fascinating people. They're horse traders. They were craft people, these great acrobats, just amazing people. And I was really impressed by them. And they said, "Okay, well, you seem okay. You passed this test." Then we went down to visit her mother. Now, her mother, though, had dementia, and she was in a rest home. And when we pulled in there, walked into the room, she didn't know who Michelle was, or she definitely didn't know who I was. And Michelle said, "It's me. It's your little Mikela, And she, "Mikela, my little Mikela." And she gave Michelle a big hug and started patting her hair, and she was back into her little baby as a young child. Well, they talked like that for a while. She spoke for a while in German. She spoke in English, and she started singing. So I just started singing with her and grabbed a mug, and we just had a great time singing, and that's how we connected. About a half hour into the visit, 2 orderlies came in to change her diapers. And when they took her to do that, she just started screaming in English and in German, "No, don't take me to the gas chamber, not the gas chamber. No, no, no." And that was very hard to watch. But we made that connection, and she didn't know who I was, so I didn't really get tested there. And I learned all about the family history for Michelle. Michelle never met her father, who was a ringmaster of the Ringling Brothers Circus, because while her mom was pregnant with her, they were coming from Lake Tahoe from a performance down the Placerville grade, down Highway 50 into Sacramento to do a performance. And on that grade, there weren't any railings back there in 1960. The lead truck went over to the side 300 feet down a cliff and killed her father, the driver, and a couple other people. So she never met her father. And that was kind of the end of the circus life for Michelle's mother. they went and bought her a house in West Hollywood. And Michelle said throughout her life, they would come every couple months and visit her. And she said it was fascinating because there was a trapeze in the back where her mother kept practicing. They would come in, they'd bring ocelots and ferrets, and Bozo the clown would come in and babysit Michelle. And it was just a fascinating time. Her brother, Harry, ended up becoming the head tiger trader for the Ringley Brothers Circus. That's why he had those tigers on his property. Her other brother became the head elephant trainer for Ringling Brothers. And after a few years, he teamed up with the mafia in Chicago and opened his own circus, which he just closed about 5 years ago. Every couple months, though, that when the circus would come in, her mother would take off of them and be gone for a couple months. And so her older brother Harry really raised. It was, and Michelle and I married in 2002. We were married 5 years and then we separated, but we've remained good friends. And I got to know quite a few of the family. Her mother and older brother passed away shortly, a couple years after we were married. The other brother with the circus is he's down in Florida now, retired down there. But I really developed an appreciation for the gypsy culture and what they had to do being discriminated against for many centuries and chastised. They were a very tight family network. And I felt very honored to be accepted into the Gypsy clan. Thank you.
That was fun. Thank you.
Well,
Good
good
story,
practice. I see some things I want to work on.
Now we can talk about specifics, but I timed it at 9 minutes, but it's longer because I didn't start this till about 3 minutes in.
I'll
So
say, you think it was 12 minutes?
4 minutes, 9 to the, about, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I definitely have to tighten that up.
So that's why we're here to practice.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, our next storyteller is Michelle, and she's been part of Wordweavers for many years. And so, because she started when we were pre-COVID at the library, as was Sarah Lord and others. Yeah. So we welcome Michelle, and I don't know if she got her topic off of our January list or she already had something in mind. Tell us about your story, Michelle. Welcome.
Well, I'm actually going to share a little poem, and I understand it's kind of out of season because Christmas technically ended this last weekend, but I didn't get it because we never met during the Christmas season. I didn't get a chance to share it, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to share it with this group.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you for sharing.
My poem is called The Child. Through the night they traveled. Through the cool, dark night they traveled. The sand made it hard to walk, but they trudged on. The jack, though tired and worn, kept moving. He would not let his master nor his rider down. The master and rider, their faith kept them going despite their insecurity. At last, they reached their destination, a small, busy village. However, every hospice is occupied. They have nowhere to go for the night. There's a stable behind my establishment, a manager informs the master. And not a moment too soon, the rider, the pain in her abdomen becomes excruciating. A star appears in the sky, big as a kite, bright as heaven's light. 3 scholars arrive and gift the infant aurum, incense, and anointing oil. Their original mission, to bring the babe and its mother to a monarch who secretly wished to slay the newborn. But a celestial being came to them in a vision and warned them. Herdsmen came to see him. The animals admired him. A boy played his drum for him, and the child of light, the child of hope, the child of goodness, the child of love, the child of forgiveness, the child of wisdom, the child of righteousness, the child of grace, the child of peace, the child of life, smiled. He is born, the heavenly ones sang. Alleluia, Emmanuel is born.
Thank you. And the author of that?
That's my poem.
All right. We
Very
like that.
nice.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. A nicely written poem.
Hmm.
Oh, I don't think I didn't highlight you during that. Okay, let me put on my, so that was Michelle, and next is Marion. I have to put my controls on here. Here we come. All right, thank you. I'm here to simply germinate a story. I am going to volunteer to share a single day, and I've decided this will be called the day that Claire, Isaac, Warhaftig, and Marion Ferrante brought a Holocaust story to light. I'll tell this in the middle of February when Stagebridge is going to honor Claire, Isaac, Warhaftig. She just passed away on December 29th. And yet she became a friend of mine. She was a fascinating woman who worked as director at some of the museums or the art departments in San Francisco for the art of the city. And she had fascinating life. And I got to know her through classes at Stagebridge. We even took a friendship time to say, let's go to the cat house now. That happens to be about 4 blocks away from Stagebridge. There's this building that it's for cat rescue and cat adoption. And you can go in just to spend some time in the rooms that have cats in houses and around, and they're being fed and they're being petted, and visitors can come in, of course, to give them attention. But we both were interested in that for just a small outing after our class before I left the city for the day. So we just did a few things and went to a few storytelling events together. But yeah, her being somewhat older than me, she did just pass away after a series of illnesses and going downhill. So we're going to honor her. She's already had the funeral, her family, but Stagers will honor her in the middle of February. So there's another person involved because it was Claire and I think to me this is so important. It meant so much to me and both to Claire that we were able to enable a person to bring her Holocaust story to light. This means that Maria Vincinetti of Pittsburgh, California, she showed up at Delta Wordweavers one night. Now, you know, we have poems and funny stories and light stories. We do also have serious stories. And one day, this woman I didn't know because I used to advertise. We met at the library regularly. This woman showed up, which is fine. And she got up timidly, like, I have a story to tell, she said partway into our event. And when she got up and revealed a personal story that started when she was 3 years old, I was blown away because later in our talking time, she said, I want to share my story. And I knew that I knew how to connect her with uh, the story, the story time. Yeah, what is that? I'm sorry, I'm losing the name of it. StoryCorps. It just so happened that StageBridge in a few weeks would present a workshop about StoryCorps to inform all of the StageBridge people who wanted to come to this workshop to learn about StoryCorps, how to do it, where it is, does it cost any money, what do you do, what time do you go, how do you get an appointment? We didn't know anything, but StageBridge wanted us to know because they know they have a house full and an organization with many tellers who might be interested in this. The timing, I always think it's God's timing. How just the doors opened up. They were going to have a workshop very soon. And I said, Maria, I will drive you. See, she didn't drive. I will drive you to the workshop so that we learn about StoryCorps. And then you can decide if that's where you also want to record a story. We agreed to that. So she and I went on a day to StageBridge in Oakland, California. For those who don't know, StageBridge is a senior arts theater community in Oakland, and they hold lots of classes. Now a lot of the classes are on Zoom, but they are opening back up that you can also now, after COVID, go back to some of their classes. But they're open to all people over 50. Yeah, to take these classes, and they're just fascinating in many topics in addition to storytelling. But this was a workshop, so we went to that workshop. Claire Isaac Warhoftig was another guest, like we were at the workshop. And I introduced Maria to Claire. We sat next to each other in the back in a row at the workshop. But Claire and Maria just connected like friends, like they already knew each other. They just were sharing different things with one another, and they clicked. Something told me to invite Claire, and I said, would you be the interviewer at the StoryCorps, I'll say event, session? Would you be the interviewer for Maria? And she agreed. I felt their lives, information about their lives connected somewhat. Though I didn't know them both real personally, there was just something about their instant friendship and connection. And also I know some about their back lives that they felt a connection. And Claire agreed. So we made an agreement on it. Well, we got an appointment. I did all the arranging to get an appointment in San Francisco. StoryCorps has a soundproof booth inside the San Francisco Public Library on the second or third floor, a soundproof booth where they conduct live interviews for people who are telling at StoryCorps. Now, these days, there's additional things you can do some at home and send them in, all that, but this was our experience at the time. So as the three of us, I told them the appointment day and they were available. So I live in Antioch. I drove to Pittsburgh, picked up Maria. I drove to Berkeley. We picked up Claire. And we went to Claire's house, and she had a little light lunch for us that we had arranged ahead of time. And as soon as Maria walked into Claire's house, she started talking about the rug. She knew where it was made. She knew the features about it. She knew something about that treasured rug, actually, that Claire had. And she commented like, oh, people don't usually know and understand about this rug and the importance of it. But there was another connection that something that they had in common and knew about. So that, and Claire shared with us a light lunch. And then we had time to drive over to San Francisco. We went. I remember it was breezy, even gusty that day. I remember our hair was going all over, and we found a parking place upstairs to see the sound booth room, and there was a StoryCorps staff person right there to meet us and took us in the soundproof room. I don't know if you've ever been in one for a hearing test, but it's odd because all the other sounds just block out. But we were seated at a table, the three of us, a small table, and from the ceiling came down the microphones. So we each actually had our own microphone right here. This was going to be a recording, sound recording only, no visual recording. And then the staff person, she stayed in the room, the little room with us the entire time, just to monitor and make sure all the equipment was working well. And indeed, Claire interviewed Maria. Just briefly, Maria had lived in Hungary, was born in Hungary, and when she was 3 years old, she remembers that she and her mother fled the country because the Nazi party was going to arrest or take away from their homes all the Jews in that her city of Hungary. So her mother was fleeing with this 3-year-old girl. She remembers walking. She said, my mother only carried me a little bit of the way, but she remembers about walking and walking and walking away from there. One other thing Maria talked about was she knew her mother acquired a soldier's coat. She said, I've only been thinking about that as an adult. And I just can't imagine, because as an adult, I can think about how did my mother acquire a soldier's coat? The favor she might have had to do with him. But that was how the mother acquired any kind of warmth. They just didn't have warmth or good food at the time of their traveling in particular. She and her mother settled in another country and went on to tell some of her stories. We had 40 minutes for Maria to tell her story. But because this day is going to honor Claire, I want to give recognition to Claire that she and I enabled a Holocaust survivor to tell her own story. And it was because of Claire, and yeah, with my help too, transporting him there, to give this honor to Maria. But today, which will be in a couple of weeks, I shall honor Claire to help make people come together. And I know Maria, she was saying, I want to tell my story. And when I heard that from her heart at Delta Wordweavers, we together made it happen for Maria. Thank you for listening to Maria and to Claire's special story about something she did very special a number of years ago with me. That's what I remember about Claire. Thank you.
Beautiful story, Marion. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. So that's the first round. I said, we're here to germinate. I just germinated this story. But of course, I'll have to cut it down. That's okay. That's our job. That's why I'm here. But yeah, I'd already been thinking about it a lot, but that's the first time I gave voice to it. So that's what I say. Wordweavers is a place you can give that first voice to your story. Thank you. Our next storyteller is Mark, and I shall highlight him here. Meanwhile, Mark, tell us about your story.
It's a true story. Not my story, but it's a story of a very dear friend. And she was born in 1922. And she just passed away at the age of 102. She just passed away last month. And I had the great honor and pleasure of being her very good friend for a number of years. And she had stories, and this is one of them. In 1933, she was 11 years old, living in Pasadena, California. It was the tail end of the Depression on the East Coast, but the Depression kind of traveled from east to west. So it was real Depression time in the Western United States in 1933 when she was 11 years old. She had a friend that lived a couple of miles away, a girlfriend, also 11-year-old girl in Pasadena. And they would visit each other as best friends do, and as 11-year-old girls would do. Well, these weren't the Barbie doll type of girls. These were more the tomboy type of girls. And they liked to toss the baseball around and play games in the yard. Well, turns out that this girlfriend had an older brother, and he was a jock. He was an athlete. And he had a lot of friends who were athletes, and they were all trying to get scholarships and trying to get into college and trying to do anything to survive the Depression. They had a large backyard, and so these jock guys would congregate there on the weekend, and Margaret and her friend were relegated to the front yard where they could play. They were tossing a baseball back and forth one day when a crosstown bus arrived, and a gentleman, very attractive, tall, young, black gentleman, very unusual for Pasadena, got off the bus. And as he was walking towards the backyard, he saw the girls playing, and he said, "Girls, would you like me to teach you how to pitch a baseball?" Oh, would they? And so he did. When he had some time, he would show them how to grip the baseball on the threads, and how to wind up, and how to kick that leg out in front, and how to whip that shoulder around, and how to pitch accurately. And now the girls were having so much fun. Now they could stand way further apart and practice their accuracy, and they were thrilled. Well, not too long after that, this young, very nice man got off the bus with something folded under his arm. When he unfolded it, it was what they call a pitching wedge. It was 4 boards with a net in the middle, and you'd set it up, you'd tip it up just right in the yard and pitch at it. And when you pitched in the middle of the pitching wedge, the ball came right back to you. And if you didn't get a strike, the ball went off another direction. So it really helped with accuracy. The girls were getting really good. Well, one day it was Margaret's dad. It was time for him to pick her up, and he saw her out in the front yard with her friend, but there was this black man. And this black man had his arms around this little girl, and he was showing her how to hold her hips and showing her how to kick and throw. And well, when Margaret got in the car with her dad to drive home, he said, "This is going to be our little secret, because your mother and Nana can never find out what you were doing this morning." Such was the world and some of the people in Pasadena in 1933. And not long after that, Margaret's father built her a pitching wedge so she could practice in her own yard. And whenever the schoolgirls were picking up members of the teams, Margaret and her friend were always the first ones chosen for the team. And if it was baseball, they were always the pitchers. And they did that the rest of their lives. It was a skill that they mastered and never lost. Well, a few years later, Margaret's now 18, about to graduate high school. And at the high school, the committee that chooses the contestants for the Tournament of Roses. Now in Pasadena, still today, but especially back then, the Tournament of Roses was the biggest thing that ever happened in anyone's life in Pasadena, and it happened every year. And every little girl in Pasadena dreamt of being on one of those floats. They dreamt of being a princess, maybe even queen of the Tournament of Roses parade, except Margaret, because Margaret was way taller than her peers, and She didn't fit the profile. She knew there'd never been anybody near her height, so she just didn't consider that part of her possible future. Well, she had an English teacher in high school, and she said, Margaret, how come you're not in there with the other girls interviewing? And Margaret said, oh, I don't fit the profile. The English teacher said, if you don't go in there and apply with the other girls, I'll give you an F. You got an A now, but I'll give you an F in English. Oh, poor Margaret. She had to go in there and go through the motions. And boy, she was surprised when it came down to cutting out people, and she was still there. It came down to choosing the final court, one of whom would be queen. And she was still there. No one was more surprised than Margaret. And finally, when they had that huge black tie affair with all the dignitaries and all the movie cameras, this is before TV. This is 1940. Everybody got their news from reading the papers and listening to the radio, and everybody did both. Margaret was chosen as the queen of the Tournament of Roses parade in 1940 at the age of 18 years old. When she passed away last year, she was the oldest living, not only the oldest living, but the oldest ever lived queen of the Tournament of Roses. She wrote and published 2 books about tournament queens. She held 3 master's degrees. She wrote 8 other books that were published. Just a fascinating woman. So when she's 18 and she's the queen and they're having all the celebrations before and after the parade, on that day, on January 1st, the queen has a book. It's kind of like a yearbook. The queen has a book, and all the dignitaries, the governors and the presidents and the movie stars and the studio heads, they all would sign the book. Well, her friend of years ago signed a page. And he said, Margaret, little did I know that young girl I taught to pitch a baseball 7 years ago would one day be my queen. Love, Jackie Robinson, number 42. I forgot to time it. Is anybody there? Oh, you're all muted.
No, Mark, this is Linda. This morning I was going through my contact list and I came to Margaret, and I was going to call you today and ask you if you had time to talk, because I wanted to know who she was. Thank you. Right now I'm just close to tears.
She passed. Me too. She passed very peacefully, and she had been looking forward to graduating from this life for quite a while before she finally did. And every time I want to feel the tears coming, I think of how happy I am for her, that she's no longer in that old body and she has no more limitations. And oh, what a good life she led. So thank you for letting me share. Now that she's not here to tell her story, I feel I can.
That's good. That's nice. You're keeping the legacy going. And was she the woman that told up there at Foothill for the festival? The older woman? Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome storyteller. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey Ed, how was my feed? Did I freeze up this time?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And
I
it
did?
comes up that you're
Oh.
low bandwidth. Yeah, you
I'm
froze.
so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought a new internet service. Certainly that would fix that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
the sound was
Oh,
really,
I guess I need a new computer. That'll be the next.
The sound was
Just-
great though.
Just for now, we're going to stop our public recording. So we thank our video listeners and watchers. Thank you for coming to Delta Wordweavers. And we'll put up some more topics for February and coming months. Thank you. I'll stop the recording.